I want to bring in Megan Greene, a Eurozone economist. Claudia Pensotti has outlined the positive measures that are being taken in Italy, but will any of that go anyway to calming markets that really are out for blood at the moment?
Yeah, it's really hard to see. I mean, the panic that we've seen in Italy over the past few days is partly due to fundamentals in Italy. I mean, as Claudia mentioned, Italy's got chronically high public debt and chronically low growth prospects, but it's also partly to do with what's going on in the rest of the EU right now, and part of why Italian government bond yields have shot up so high is that investors aren't willing to hedge by buying CDS, because there's a big debate about whether the CDS market is even ever going to be allowed to be triggered. So instead they're just shorting Italian debt. And at the same time, Italy unfortunately isn't existing in a vacuum, and so quite a lot of what we're seeing in Italy really is contagion from the rest of the Eurozone. And Italy, can't be analyzed sort of in isolation if the euro crisis actually spreads to Spain, which has even more worrisome fundamentals than Italy's economy does. Then Italy would be inextricably bonded to Spain and would also need a bailout. And there's no way that the EU could possibly bail out Spain and Italy, so that would be sort of the end of the crisis. So I think what we would need to actually be able to end the current panic is some sort of decisive, cohesive action at the EU level to show that EU leaders are actually getting ahead of this crisis, and we haven't seen that to date, so I'm not entirely hopeful that we will in the next few days.
Emma McNamara, my colleague, said there is now an emergency meeting on Friday, and she used words similar to yourself, Megan. She said, what's needed is direction, certainty and a unified voice, but you don't see that coming from Europe.
That's right. I mean, one of the points that will presumably be discussed at this meeting is to increase the size and the scope of the EFSF once again. But that will, of course, need ratifying by national parliaments, which are all on holiday until September. So just if you look at the first step, that looks like it will be impossible. So I think we'll probably see quite a lot of panic throughout the summer.
So what would it take to calm markets in Italy now, to calm the markets as they look towards Spain, and to try and even buy time between now and the autumn?
I think the markets are pretty wary of efforts just to buy time at this point, because that's all really EU leaders have managed to do in this crisis. So I think what it would really take was some fundamental step towards fiscal union, because as Claudia mentioned, fiscal union or Eurozone breakup are really the only two end games here. So, you might see that if they do actually allow the EFSF to start participating in the secondary market. That could be a first step towards fiscal union, and so the markets could be calmed by that.
But do you believe that the talk of some default for Greece will add to further flight of the markets rather than bring some stability?
I think that it's pretty well accepted generally amongst economists, certainly, and also amongst investors, that Greece is insolvent. And so I think some sort of attempt to actually address that rather than just, continuing with bailouts might actually, depending on how it's handled, might instill confidence in the markets rather than cause further unrest, because there would be some contagion if there were a Greece default of sorts. But if it were handled in a really managed, transparent way, I think it could be viewed as actually a positive step.
All right, I just want to go back to you, Claudia, for a last word. We saw in Greece the anger of the public boil over onto the streets as austerity programmes were introduced and implemented. Is there any sign that Italians have that level of anger now at what they're looking down the tracks at?
No, actually you don't get that feeling, surprisingly enough. This is a fairly new panic stream, I guess, that's just, a few days old. So I can't say that won't set in. I saw some statistics that said, are you concerned about your investments, seeing the situation the way that it is, and 75% said yes, 25% said no. So by the statistic you would think, yes, there's concern, but the anger and the sort of desperation or fear that maybe we'll be a Greece, you don't really see that. You don't feel it here in the streets, because again, I think that it is as sort of we were hearing by the other people that are intervening here, is that it's mostly that we're lacking the EU leadership that can come in and give the security. It's sort of we need the father to step up to the plate and take his responsibility and let everybody feel more comfortable. And so Italy, I think, and Italians realize that they're at this point kind of in the middle of a firing squad, and they're being targeted. But as we've said, there are, of course, serious problems, but nothing new that we haven't been living with for years, and that can't be faced with the appropriate reforms and moves by the political.
Okay, Claudia
force.
Pensotti in Italy and Megan Greene in London. Thank you both. It's 4:45.